Britain has oil, a lot of it. North Sea oil helped power this country for decades. So why are British drivers paying some of the highest fuel prices in the developed world? Why does a man driving a van in Birmingham stop pumping petrol at £17? Not because the tank is full, but because the money is gone. There is an answer most people never hear. Because it is not one thing, it is a system. And once you see how it works, the question changes completely. The man at the pump.
Welcome to Fix Britain. No politics, no lies, no propaganda, just logic and common sense for you.
A few weeks ago, petrol station in Birmingham. Early evening, rain starting, white van beside pump number 4. The driver looked exhausted, probably finishing work, probably thinking about rent, electricity, food prices, the usual modern British experience. The numbers kept climbing. Then he stopped, not because the tank was full, because that was all he could afford. And standing there watching him, I kept thinking the same thing. This is an oil producing country, so why does driving feels like a luxury? Britain runs on cars. If you live in central London, maybe life without a car is possible. Tube, buses, trains. But most of Britain is not central London. Most of Britain drives builders, electricians, delivery drivers, nurses working night shifts. For millions of people, the car is not a hobby. It is infrastructure. It is survival, which means expensive petrol stop feeling like an inconvenience and start feeling like a tax on everyday life. Britain extracts oil, yet ordinary people increasingly drive like a fuel belongs to somebody else. And that raises the question most people ask first. We have oil in the North Sea. Can't we just use it? Can't we just keep it here and make it cheaper? It sounds obvious, which is exactly why the answer is worth understanding carefully. The price elsewhere. I travel not as a tourist, as a someone who watches how countries work. And once you think you notice quickly moving between countries is the price of fuel. Egypt, Jordan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, the United Arab Emirates. I feel the tanks in all of them and the number of the pump look completely different. Now I know what you are thinking. Some of those countries subsidize fuel heavily. Government money covering part of the real cost, that's true. But here is what's also true. Even in countries like that, subsidized, the pump price is low, those governments still collect tax, road tax, import duties. The infrastructure still has to be paid for, and yet drivers there pay a fraction of what a driver in Birmingham pays, which raises a question I kept coming back to. Britain is not subsidizing fuel, but Britain is not a poor country either. Britain has its own oil, So, what exactly is British fuel duty paying for, and where does it actually go? The pipe in the sea. Most people imagine something like a pipe. Oil comes out of the North Sea, travels to a refinery somewhere, becomes petrol, appears at the pump. The reality is completely different. And this is the part almost nobody in Britain knows. North Sea oil is traded as a global commodity. It is priced in dollars on international markets. The benchmark is called Brent crude, and it moves based on demand. Britain does not set the price. Nobody does. The market does. So even if Britain extracted more oil tomorrow, that oil would still be sold at global market price to whoever pay most of it, not necessary to Britain, because that's how commodity markets work. But here is where it gets stranger. Most North Sea oil can't even be refined in Britain, not because of capacity, because of chemistry. The oil extracted from modern North Sea fields is what the industry calls sour crude. Heavy, difficult to process. Britain's existing refineries were largely designed decades ago to handle a different type of oil, litre, historically imported from Libya and the Middle East, which creates a situation that is difficult to believe until you see the numbers. The next figure shocked me when I first read it. At the time of recording, only around 8% of the oil used in Britain refineries comes from the UK continental shelf. 8%, the number was 50% in 1996. So, what happens to the rest of North Sea oil? It gets exported, sold globally, and Britain imports lighter crude from elsewhere. Norway, the United States, the Middle East. To actually refine into fuel for British roads, Britain exports the oil it can't refine and imports the oil it can. That driver beside pump number 4, he didn't know he was paying for a supply chain that goes halfway around the world. Most people don't. But there is a second part to this story, and this one was built deliberately. The receipt. Even if you solved the global pricing problem, even if Britain kept its own oil, refined it here, kept the value onshore, there would still be the question of what gets added before it reaches your tank. At the time of recording, every litre of petrol sold in Britain includes 53% of fuel duty. Fixed. Government set per litre frozen. That level since 2011. 14 years without magnificent change. Then VAT gets added 20% on the local price, including on the duty itself. So British drivers pay tax. Then they pay tax on the tax at the typical pump price of around £1 33, roughly 17 pence per litre is tax. That's over half of the price of litre of petrol going through the treasury before anyone makes a penny of profit. And this system rises around to £25 billion a year. 25 billion from people filling tanks. to get to work. Now, here is the structural detail that most people miss. Fuel duty is fixed per litre, but VAT is a percentage, which means when oil prices rise on global markets, VAT collected rises automatically without any vote in parliament, without anyone deciding to raise the taxes. The system collects more simply because the world prices went up. In the 90s and 70s, Britain opened 18 refineries. At the time of recording, 4 remain. 2 more closed in 2025 alone. A refinery output today is around 55% below its peak, which means Britain is now doing simultaneously exporting oil it cannot refine, importing crude it can process from Norway, the United States, the Middle East, and importing significant volumes of already refined diesel and jet fuel because domestic production falls short. Then adding 53 pence of duty per litre, then adding VAT on top of that, and the man beside pump number 4 pays whatever that adds up to. The second question, but here is the question that the refinery story arises and that nobody in Westminster has even clearly answered. Who decided this was acceptable? When did Britain decide to stop investing in refineries capacity? At what point did it become normal for oil-producing country to export its own material and imports the expensive finished product back? We will come back to that because the answer involves a logic that makes sense in a spreadsheet and stop making sense at the petrol pump. The Norway question. Norway discovered oil in the North Sea at almost exactly the same time as Britain. Same sea, same era, similar starting point. Different decisions. Norway treated oil as a long-term national asset, something to preserve, something to invest, something future generations would benefit from. Norway created a sovereign wealth fund, a national saving account built from oil revenue over decades. It became one of the best and largest investment funds on earth. Today, that fund owns stocks in thousands of companies, properties, and infrastructure projects across the globe. Meanwhile, Britain closed refineries, and ordinary drivers in Birmingham debate whether they can afford a full tank. This is not about Norway being somehow normally superior. It is about what happens when two countries manage the same resource through completely different systems. Same sea, very different systems. So here is what I think this story is actually about. Britain didn't run out of oil. It ran out of the policy that would have made the oil work for the people above it. The pump isn't measuring fuel. It is measuring 40 years of decisions that turned a national resource into somebody else's margin. And the strange part is, most people still think this happened naturally, like a petrol simply become expensive on its own. The man at pump number 4 thinks he is paying for petrol. In reality, he is paying for the structure built around it. Thank you.